Hello, everyone. Welcome to Epic Work Item Migration Weekly. It's 14th December. And first item we have is the discussion point, unless we want to quickly go through workstream updates. I think updates are mostly read only, so we'll just jump to discussions directly. Amanda, you want to verbalize? I believe we have already gotten a bunch of responses, but in case we want to go through the discussions, we can still do so.
Yeah, I only want to use the time for things that I think the team needs to discuss. I'm happy to read async the responses.
Okay, so I think we have mostly async discussions. There are some blocker which need some help. I believe it is part of workstream 3. So first blocking item is work on internal IDs backfilling has started. We have hit a small hiccup in terms of migration in rolling deployments environment raised by Julian. And okay, I think it is more of an FYI. And Alexandro, you have second point. You want to verbalize?
Yeah, the first point was for me as well. So it's basically an FYI in that we said that we will do the backfilling of the internal IDs, and then we've hit this small hiccup where we can, like, because of the rolling deploys that we have on .com, it's not that simple. So we'll probably need to add some triggers first. And yeah, I was not sure if that's possible as part of a single MR, but it sounds like that should be okay. Anyway, I've pinged everyone who's involved in that in the MR for any kind of things that you may come up with where you think that if there can be any problems. So please do go and post your concerns if you have any. But yeah, that's the quick update on the backfilling of the internal IDs.
So from the discussion points that Amanda has left, I think second item is more of still an open question. So are we moving towards one single reference wildcard using hash symbol and no longer providing lookup to filter by say ampersand, which has always been used to represent epics? And I think for initial iteration, I think we should be fine with using normal hash-based IDs because everything is in issue stable. But down the line, we would eventually want to support ampersand-based IDs. So, in case anyone wants to further elaborate on the subject.
Should we change all the references that exist already to work item references?
I don't think we can, right? Like there are, if you think of how a comment is added, you can use and sign and put in a number. So that's how it is saved in a raw comment. In the HTML, we replace it with a link, but in the raw comment, you still have the and ID reference. So for that reason, I think we'll have to kind of keep that for backward compatibility, but yeah, I'm not sure how it will work further on. Like, should the and sign and hashtag continue to work with all work items, or not sure. But ideally, we should not, like someone mentioned, we should not have different signs or things for different types.
Yeah, I would expect that the ampersand will continue working only for the old or legacy epics, but going forward, any newly created work item epics will support only the standardized or generic work item reference.
I was just going to add a long time ago, I collaborate with different groups and teams at GitLab to come up with Brett to come up with like a different, more extensible reference syntax, because we're running out of special characters anyways, and there's like a bunch of other things that people want to do. So we haven't like implemented this all, but this is like I think the direction of the spec that we want to go. We'll just need to think through, because we did this before we had work items and work item types, of like if you can reference a type as a top level reference, or if you just like how exactly that will work. Like if it's work item colon and then the value of the referenced work item, or if it's like the type and then colon and then the reference thing. I'm not sure, but for now, yeah, I think we do want to standardize on the hashtag, just so long as we don't break any existing references that use the ampersand. I think that's important.
To your last point there, Gabe, so how are we keeping the ampersand to reference epics when epics are work items?
Well, it was my understanding that we can't go back to and change everywhere that the ampersand reference is used in all markdown files, right? So like we can't like go migrate everything that's already created. So I think we have to figure out a way to make sure that all of those references still work, but moving forward, we'd want to use the hashtag once migrations happen. We'll have to figure out how to educate users about that. And maybe we want to use the new reference syntax too, or something, but I just want to make sure that we don't break a bunch of links in existing references.
So my understanding is that to make sure that the existing epic references keep working in the nodes and anywhere else is the reason why we plan to copy over the existing internal IDs of epics to the work item table. So the internal ID of existing epics will remain same. We will just add the handling that ampersand internal ID reference will find this internal ID in the work item table eventually. So it should remain backward compatible and the existing references should keep working because we preserve the existing internal IDs.
Right. So like once we move epics to work items, we will basically have two ways of referencing work items, right? Like with the ampersand and with the hashtag.
Yes, but eventually we plan to remove completely the epics resource.
Right, but we still need to keep like we need a way to not allow it in the UI, but we need a way to keep it in the backend, because like if you bump up the markdown version, you need to be able to parse the original raw comment that uses ampersand into transforming it into
you are
right.
I assume that this double reference would have to remain going forward forever.
Could we just add redirects from epics to the work item versions of those?
That would work, but you still have this hover effect where you hover over like an ampersand link and you see a preview of the epic title and maybe ID and description or labels. So that would need to still work.
Once we migrate, could we make the ampersand like an alias of the hashtag for a little while so it still works? Something like that. So we're still referencing basically work items, but it's just we're treating it almost like as an alias. But we don't offer it in the UI, but it still like will work as an alias of the hashtag or something.
Yeah, I think we'll need to come up with something smart on the front end where you can type ampersand ID, but then it's replaced with the hashtag or something along those lines, right? So you can kind of still use it, but like educate the user in a way that you should be using hashtag, and then eventually just removing that functionality from the UI basically.
It is just that, like, we're doing even such a small change like that, like either replacing ampersand with hash or like asking user to explicitly use hash, will require a lot of learning curve because we have like years of muscle memory of hashes being always used against issues and ampersand always used against epics. So if we are replacing, say, both the symbols with a completely different syntax, like Gabe mentioned, that we want to go ahead with type colon and or whatever symbol and then IID, then it would still be easier to transition because we are not interchanging values. Now what we are proposing here is that we want to use hash instead of ampersand. So it will always create that confusion even if someone is just looking at a rendered markdown that this hash IID is actually pointing to a work item epic and it is not actually an issue.
Why don't we take a follow-up here to create an issue for this and just like loop in UX about like how they want to create that transition experience? Because it will require a little bit of intentional thought about how to educate the users. And I think if we know what the ideal user experience is, we can kind of work backwards on a technical solution. I think if y'all are cool with that.
Yeah. It definitely makes sense to have product and design inputs before we determine the engineering approach for this. I'll create a discussion issue.
Thank you.
Do we have any other point that we want to discuss in the call?
Don, you were saying something on a Slack message about depends on if we have to delete project level work items or something about how fast we could. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So there's a question about project level epics and then OKRs and when we could do that and all those other things.
Yeah. We've had some discussion in the past few meetings around going through and deleting existing group level work items during the migration. That's still the plan, right? I think that's part of, it's either part of workstream 2 or 3 where we made that decision.
And yes, this is part of both actually, and this is needed so we can copy internal IDs between legacy epics and work items. So yeah, we are going to delete them.
We discussed that we
Yeah,
also
okay.
we discussed that we also error on the API if someone tries to create a work item on the epic work item in a group. I think Alexandru, we discussed this last week, and did we create the issues for this?
Actually, he sent me a link of the discussion. So I'm supposed to create an issue or maybe just open an MR to maybe remove the feature flag or just only return false on the mutation or something like this. Yeah, I'm assigned to this one.
Yeah, I'd use some help there because like that, I don't want to grow that MR into like a huge one because I tried to just remove the feature flag from the code and I got like 10 specs or something like that failing because of that, which will add a lot of overhead to the MR itself. So just moving that part of disabling creation of the group level work items to a separate MR, merging that, and then having the backfilling follow-up MR will be nice.
Also, Alexandru, on those steps, I was thinking we should, if we are disabling the creation of group level work item types in another MR, right after yours is merged, we should introduce the new index for uniqueness on the IID for namespaces, right? Right after yours, and it's still disabled, so we shouldn't have any conflicts.
I think we should introduce the index also before, just as a safe mechanism, as a safe thing, just to have the unique index first, and then come up with the backfilling, because then at least the migration will fail. We'll know that we have a problem. Otherwise, we will not detect the problem until we introduce the index.
Well, in that case, you would need to split your MR. I mean, because you have to do the wiping of the group level work item types first, right? Or are you saying that we should introduce the index first? Last time we discussed, we agreed it would be better to wipe first, just to, I don't know, be extra safe. But I think it's still pretty safe. As we discussed, we do have a mechanism to prevent conflicts in our IDs anyway.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think we
Yeah,
should
we can sync up. We can sync up after this one and see where we want to add that indexing. Maybe we just add it to the same MR that I'm creating.
Sure, we can discuss afterwards.
It might be good to talk through some of the other discussions that Amanda brought up, especially the ones that there is some discussion back and forth. I'm looking specifically at John's comment, I5. John, are you here? No.
No, he's in a meeting, but yeah, that's a good point. And I'm sorry for using confusing language. I asked if Epic migration is possible to roll back, and I didn't mean the data migration. I meant if we put users on the new experience and all of a sudden something terrible happens, can we put them on the old experience?
So I think so. This could happen until we can roll back until legacy epics still exists after we delete that table, and we probably cannot.
So I had a follow-up question in 5B, which is, can we turn the Epic experience on work items on internally to dog food it before data migration so that we can see if we can work out any problems before data migration and before we put people on that new experience to mitigate?
Before data migration is probably not possible. Just because you need the data in order to access the epics, right? As work item, like you have an epic as a legacy. In order to access that epic as a work item, you need to have migrated the data. So you can.
I mean, it depends at what scale we want to dog food it. Like we can do it within the plan group without a lot of risk, I think. But if we're talking about trying to dog food epics for all of internal GitLab through the GitLab org group, at that scale, we're probably going to have to, the data migration is going to have to be.
Could we isolate the data migration just for that internal GitLab and allow them to? Yeah, I don't want SaaS. I don't want customer facing SaaS, just internal GitLab.
I think
I don't know which one it is.
I don't think we need to block data migration for that. Like data migration should not alter any of the experience. Data migration is basically like dongler alongside the legacy stuff, right? Like we are not using that data just yet, and we will start using it very incrementally. So I guess I'm a bit confused with the data migration question here. How do you see that affecting sort of the experience?
Yeah, let me explain the goal, because I just might be asking for the wrong thing. The goal is to be able to, absent being able to put people on the new experience and roll them back, right? So let's say that's off the table. Then before generally releasing that, I would love to test the new environment at scale, not just the plan project group, at scale, and get some usage on it to make sure that we don't have any surprising gaps, bugs, or workflow issues. So whether that requires data migration or not, I would leave it to you. I would think that I would want real data to test that.
So I'll try to explain how we think the process would go, and then you tell me if you see there a problem. So what happens is we create a duplicate of the whatever is in epics in issues, right? So at this point, the data migration is happening, but nothing is changing for the user. The user still reads, for instance, the data from the epics table. Now, when we start reading the data from the issues table, again, for the user themselves, in the UI, nothing changes. They continue to use the legacy epics UI. We just move, for instance, reading description instead of reading from the epics table, reading from the issues table. Now, we plan on doing those incrementally, like doing some of the fields and then moving along with some other fields and so on. So we should catch any of the performance issues or other concerns basically when we move these incremental steps, like reading the I don't know, the description or reading the relationships. And because that will land on .com first, like we should be able to catch that a lot faster than getting that to self-managed.
Yeah, so I think with that, the point of no return, since we don't have two-way sync, is turning on the work items UI for either legacy epics or new epics. Like once they're able to start editing epics in the issues table or creating epics in the issues table, it's not going to be as easy to go back to the old view because they will not have access to the newly created work items, work item epics in the legacy UI.
Could we enable the new UI while epics are still on the legacy table?
No.
We can as read only, but once they start editing in that view, that's where things get iffy.
Okay.
I think if we are going to hold the reference from ID, we are going to have a sync from the work item to the epics table to hold the ID to keep REST API compatible. So I think if you have a disaster, maybe we can read those IDs and try to backfill the legacy tables, but that will require some work. But
no, I don't think that's needed. I mean, we will keep the legacy experience for basically as long because we need to migrate all of the data to issues table, and then you can have the back and forth between the UIs. But like behind the scenes, it's still going to be the same code. So like there is no the only change is basically the interface, and we can keep the interface for as long as needed, basically. Just because the epics only becomes a mapper of the old ID to the new ID.
Okay, but my statement was correct, right? Like once we start writing to the issues table, we don't have a syncing mechanism to update the epics table as of now.
Yes, that's correct. I think that from that point, it would be difficult to basically roll back, or if at that point we get a feedback from customers, this is definitely not no go for us. We would have to figure out some bidirectional synchronization and synchronize back issues back to epics.
No,
I-
wait, but Jan, if we do enable the updating on the work item side when we have already slimmed down the Epic model to only IDs, you can have them go back and forth between the UIs as long as they need, because the only sync back we need to do, and we said that we will do that, is syncing back basically the ID only, and then they can use the old UI, the old APIs, but it will still read from the issues table. So there is no.
Yeah, I meant if we would find out that it's not acceptable to read from issues table. So for whatever reason, some performance reason or something like that, I would expect that we can identify these issues in earlier phases before we would get to the point.
Well, yeah, but it was mentioned that like once we allow users to write into the work items, but we will not allow them to write into the work items until we have slimmed it down to only IDs. So like we should be getting, or we should be catching these performance issues like when we start delegating stuff to the issues table. We will still have the data in the epics table. We will delegate the reads, which is where I guess the most performance impact would be when you read, because you can read in like multiple epics and so on. Writing is always basically to a single record, so I don't see big concerns there. So like I think we should catch that sooner rather than later.
Yes, I agree. We should catch it. I was just mentioning that from once we use the issues table as single source of truth, it would be difficult to get back to the epics table.
Okay, but yes, it will. I agree, it will be hard, and it's going to be the very, very, very last resort. But if for whatever reason we have to, I think Felipe's plan around doing a backfill off of the IDs that we're linking is probably our loosely defined rollback plan. And I don't think we really need to get too much more detailed in that rollback plan, other than knowing that we do have a last case rollback plan.
Okay, I think there was one other question that wasn't answered if you wanted to use the time. It's 4, I think. Epic start dates and dates currently use 2 different widgets. And we're going to reduce this to 1 widget. Will there be any issue migrating the information? I think the answer is no, because within the widget, there's still a separate start and end date. But I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, I think Eugenia and Tassia, but my understanding is that it's a single widget, but it still has 2 fields. So you cannot you cannot add just the start date or just the end date. You add both as a widget. And I think that's still the functionality that we have right now. I don't think you can add one or the other, or have one or the other. You still need to have both, but you can set them separately as inherited, or like roll up, or fixed, or things like that.
Well, in the future, we are changing the inherited versus fixed from being separate options to a single option for both. So that is something that we have to create rules for, where it's not the same, so that when you do the data migration, you know which one to take. But just wanted to confirm that there's no complication there. That
Yeah,
Do,
like if
do you
we
mean,
do that
Amanda?
once we have, if we do that once we
Sorry.
have all migrated, then we should be okay. I'm sorry.
Do you mean merging the start and due date together, or the type of date, inherited versus fixed? I'm not sure I understand the problem.
both, kind of. So
Both.
today,
Okay.
today it's 2 separate widgets. It's a start date that has a date value, and it has the ability to set fixed or inherited. And then it's another widget, which is the due date, which has the ability to set fixed or inherited. In the new design, it's a single widget that has a start and an end as a single widget, 2 different fields, but as a single widget. And you can only pick fixed or inherited to apply to both.
Yes. Well, in the backend, we keep them separate. So there shouldn't be a problem in the data we use today. We're going to use the same for work items, keep them separate. So the fixed date is in one place and the inherited is in another place. So there shouldn't be. And about combining the 2 dates together, this is something that was discussed, I think, a couple of meetings ago. But the idea was that customers rarely use different dates for start and end. So why don't we just put one day, inherited or fixed? But because this is going to be in the future, for now, we still need to have both in case it's different data. So we need a target to where we're going to migrate the data. And also, I think it's for how the widget looks today. But if they are the same, it shouldn't matter. I guess in the end, maybe we can delete one column and rename it. But the only difference is we're going to have 2 columns that have the same value. And when someone saves a date, we will save that date as start and end. So we'll save it in 2 places. We will have to modify the backend eventually to clean it. I think until we make the decision of how that would look, now we were just replicating what we have, and then we'll see. That looks like a simpler option, but it will need a bit more investigation of how it's going to look once we get to that part of we have that feature widget.
So it sounds like the back end's just going to kind of replicate what we have today. And
Yes.
the front end is going to make the decision on what to show when it has mixed values. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else that stands out from those groups of questions that you want to discuss?
I have one more question. Not sure if I've overseen this, overlooked this. We have a few pages like the Epic swim boards or roadmap view that are Epic specific, right? And we need a work item version of these because we can't just use the Epics table anymore once it's migrated. It's not blocking any work stream, like it's not blocked from any part, right? So we could do this beforehand, but it would be blocking the whole rollout if we don't have these GraphQL queries and endpoints.
My understanding about this is that we are going to keep using the Epic record. Otherwise, we will need to, we need to support the API, so the Epic entity and the Epic type. And for those to work, we need to use the Epic record. The way I saw is that the Epic record would only have an ID and an IID, and everything else would be delegated to the issue. So, but the API endpoints would be working the same. And when you filter, for example, in swim lanes, you filter the issues by Epic ID, nothing should change because that Epic ID will still be the same and will still work once the associations are updated and all of that, if that makes sense. But is that what you were referring to?
Because my question, I still don't understand how it would work because we only have the reference and we still need to change the queries underneath, right?
No, we can continue to use the old roadmap and old swim lanes for as long as we need to, just because we have the mappings, right? You just use the same API. What happens beneath, what happens on the backend doesn't matter. It delegates to the issues table or whatever it needs to do to pull the data, basically. But that's like we can continue to do that for as long as we need to, and migrate at whatever pace we need to the newer APIs, GraphQLs or whatnot. At least that's my understanding.
But this is always a one-to-one mapping. Like sometimes the new data is maybe in a widget instead of the issues table, right?
So that's what
yes,
the backend will need to
have
handle, right?
Every information, every field from the Epic record will still be accessible through the API. The thing is, in the backend, we would have to find that data in the work item. Whatever the work item is doing with that data, we're gonna have to find it and gather it. So instead of saving it back in the epics table, we just find it, and that might be a performance problem. But that's
what
kind
I'm
of what we
more
did with
concerned,
requirements.
Yeah, we already have
But
epic performance
we
issues.
have to do it
Okay.
to
We
keep
also
the
need
API
to,
working.
yeah, we also need to explicitly state that we cannot add new, or we should not add new features to those things until they're migrated to work items. Which I don't think is it shouldn't be a problem. Like we haven't added a whole lot of new features, definitely the swim lanes. I don't think we have to roadmaps for in a little bit either. So this does buy us some time to do that migration. We also need to handle it in the list view. But that's for all work items. We need to port the list views over to using work items as opposed to the issues table, which we're going to go to GA on this migration with. I was going to ask something else, but I forgot what it was. So is this mapping mechanism going to be the same mechanism that we used for the backwards compatibility of the REST of the Epic's REST API?
I think so. Yeah, because it would be possible to change the Epic entity that we return, but if we still need to return the response that includes the same fields. So yeah, I thought it would be the same. I think it's simpler, the REST API for Epics than GraphQL, I think, but I'm not sure.
For REST, it's simpler because we have the representation as an entity. So like in the entity, you can map it from whatever you want to. You can pull it from issue or from Epic or from, I don't know.
Yeah.
But for GraphQL, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, but so for this mapping, we kind of have to keep it around forever. Right?
As long as we have the API endpoints support, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
For REST,
But that
it's probably for a long time. For GraphQL, we can like for GraphQL, I think we have a policy of 6 releases or something like that.
Yeah.
So in those 6 releases, we need to aim to replicate those same endpoints for work items. For example, work items boards, that would be one that to replace completely the Epic board. Roadmaps as well, and swim lanes is just basically filtering by Epic. So we will have those 6 months for those 3 important endpoints to be able to drop them. Don't know if it would be enough time.
Did we assess at any point to use a database view to replace the Epics table after the migration of data? This way we probably could keep using the Epics model and the REST API and everything that uses Epic, at least in a read mode, should be easy enough. Because we could create a database view that selects from the issues table all the data that we need to replicate the Epics table as a view instead of a table, and everything should work out of the box, basically.
Sort of, but like that's not different from running the query of the view in the code, right? You're basically doing the same thing.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have to change much the code itself, and the view it's more static, right? We just have to build it once, and everything that we already have in Ruby should continue working. So I'm just trying to reduce the toil here to the work. I'm not sure if this was already assessed or not, but maybe we could test that, like building a view that's replicates the epic table, and the model, at least for reading, should be able to do everything the way it already does.
Yeah, I mean, we can try, but I'm not sure. Again, the problem, I don't see the problem with just reading from the issues table itself and filtering by the type. The problem with the performance and all that stuff, I think, would derive more when you go into associations, epics associations, and all that stuff. So again, I'm not sure how easy it would be to create views for all of those tables and still keep the things in place, right?
Yeah, but we just need to create the view that replicates the epics table, right? And reading from the epics view instead of the table should be enough to, for instance, keeping the REST API. At least for reading, yeah.
Can you have a table and a view that are named the same thing? Or
No.
would we so you create a view called like epics view or something, which mimics the table, and then you switch an active record to use that instead of yeah, it's an interesting idea. Like, you wanted to investigate it? I don't know. I think it's probably worth looking into.
And to be honest, I think Postgres even have the power to do inserts on a view. So we need to create some rules in the database that we can do the insert targeting the view, but it actually goes to the issues table. So maybe to keeping the REST API, it can be a solution. Probably it will have some performance issues, but since the idea is just to keep the API for the users, I don't think it might be such a problem.
Actually, issue might be that it would work around any model validations or any model logic we would want to use on work item model, yeah, because we would use the all legacy model going forward, which we rather want to get rid of and stop maintaining it and use the single part of working with the records, I would expect. But if there is preference to use it for some time now, then we can give it a try with records.
Yeah, again, my main intention here is just to try to facilitate the transition period, like keeping the REST API and keeping the transition period. Migrating the data, it's already a big trouble, and if you have to rewrite a lot of backend code as well at the same time, might be very hard. Maybe creating a view can just reduce this work while we keep doing the migration of the code.
It's not an investigation on that wouldn't block any of the 3 work streams. So I mean, Nicasio, if you or somebody else wants to take it and give it a shot, you know, like in proof of concept or something, like I think it's probably worth doing because it could potentially save quite a bit of effort. It doesn't change anything, right, about the fact that we have to still sync, like get feature parity, then sync, then backfill. This is for after that.
Yes, exactly. Once I finish the date, start and due date work, I can POC on that.
What does that mean? I'm in ventriloquist mode. I don't understand.
Means you're able to speak without
with your mouth shut. Yeah. That's my contribution to this meeting. You're welcome.
and that's a perfect posture, by the way.
Yeah, he's still frozen. Someone else talk for him.
Oh, I can
Who
even
wants
see
to?
that I'm frozen. Oh, that's creepy.
Anyways, we are over time
You're frozen
already.
in the thinking pose as well. So
Yeah. So should we end it here and take any other discussion in the async issues?
Anyone that wants to leave can, but should we talk through 4A, John's question? Oh, now he can't even talk.
I can talk. I got the power of speech back. I don't know. I can't unmute again though because I'm getting a spinning beach ball. So I'll just try and keep quiet after I've spoken. Yeah, do we need to find coverage for any DRIs that are on PTO over the holiday period? Another way to phrase this would be like, if you're responsible for some work stream and you want to take quality PTO, would you like to delegate anything to somebody else who isn't taking a holiday?
As far as managing the calls are concerned, I'll be around for next 2 weeks. But yeah, depending on the attendance, I don't expect a lot of people would be available in last week of December for the call. So, but yeah, I'll be around in case anything requires coordination. But yeah, regarding the engineering streams, I'll let the engineers take the call there.
Sounds like there are no concerns. All right, let's move on. The last one's just an FYI for me, by the way. I wanted to note that this decision was taken in an issue, and I didn't know if it would be noted by others. But yeah, that we'd previously described that we would follow a finder create pattern when it comes to, so you update an existing epic, it would look for a work item, and if it find it, it would update it. If it didn't find it, it would create it. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to do a find and update pattern instead, which means that, like, yeah, we'll create an epic when a legacy epic is created. We'll create a work item, but we won't, we'll only update those ones that were created, if that makes sense.
I have an annoying
that does make any
question.
sense.
I have an annoying question that maybe next time we meet, we can discuss, but based on everything that's been talked about so far, I am curious what people are thinking about timeline and what it's looking like based on the amount of work that we know of. And if we feel like Q1 is a realistic target or not. So maybe we can think about it offline, and next time we meet, that can be on the agenda.
Q1 to April all. I went through a few months where I kept thinking Q1 was the end of January. And
So it's
stressed.
April, end of April or April 1st?
End of April, right?
Not April 1st. April Fool's, like, you have a new UI. No, but that would be interesting, of like what timelines are looking like based on what we know. And I don't want us to work toward a date just because it's a date, right? But it would be good to have an idea of what things are looking like.
Melissa, if we could just verbalize what that goal is, like confidence against what goal is, does that include data migration and users on the new experience? Is that something else?
From my perspective, is that people can create epics as work items. And basically the detail page is a work item page, and that roadmaps, boards, everything else continues to work as expected.
And
That
so
to
not
me
data
is like,
migration?
that's a good question. I would say there's likely, I don't know, in my mind, there's a path where new users could be on the new experience, and that's like an NBC. But it would also be interesting to see, like, data migration, when does it completely close, right? That it's like we're done with epics as work items.
I think we learned, unless I'm mistaken, that we can't do that because we can't create new group level or epic records prior to migration because we'd have to
Then the
delete
whole
them.
thing. Then the whole thing.
Then the whole kit and caboodle. Okay. The whole
Workstream
enchilada.
3. Once the backfill is done, we can create work items at the group level. Even if everything else isn't done. At that stage, every legacy epic has a work item. We need to do a little bit of work for bidirectional sync at that point, I think. Am I right?
I think there is
Did I think
more
about
work, John. Like once the backfilling migration is done, we need to, the next big chunk of work is slimming down the Epic model, right? Which means basically delegating from Epic to the issues.
Yeah, you're right.
So the data migration itself is going to take, I don't know. Yeah, I don't like, I'd say a couple milestones, I don't know. Because we're still figuring out a lot of the associations mappings between epics and issues from what I can see in the workstream 2, right? So there is that. Then there is the backfilling of that, and then we need to slim down, which means there is the core work of backend changes, basically of mapping and delegating from epic to the issues. So I'll expect that to take 1 to 2 milestones maybe as well. But again, roughly from where I
Yeah,
stand.
we don't have to answer it now, right? That's something maybe y'all can help do offline, and then we can talk about it next meeting.
Sounds good.
How long do we think the actual backfill is going to take? Like the database migration for .com?
So your question is, how long do we think it will take?
Yeah, and with something like this, would there be a way to jump the queue if we need to, or is it going to, like, should we?
So for any
think
data
about-
migration, we basically need 2 milestones at least. One is queuing the data migration, and the second one is making sure that it did finalize. So we have this thing with the batch background migrations where you queue it. In most cases, it will run successfully, but you still need some safe point to say and check, did it actually complete, so that you can move on then and use that data. So that is usually because of the self-managed, like on .com, we could do it much faster, but because of the self-managed, you need to split it into 2 releases. One is queuing, the other one is checking that completed, because data migration can run a long time. So I'm not like, I'm not at that point, but maybe for epics, that is not a concern. Like it depends how many records we're talking about, right? Definitely not something that we would be able to do if it's a huge table, like millions and millions of records. You really need to go through that in a slow manner.
Okay, but so taking into account the minimum 2 milestone there, we should see if we can get the migration plan done by the end of this quarter. And that'll give us an extra milestone to play around with. I don't know what face you're making, Melissa.
I think 1 milestone seems like enough, but I'm not sure. We could also say we feel 50% confidence or something. I think that's acceptable.
Yeah, I think once we figure out all of the epic associations, how do they map into the issues? Yeah, once we figure that out, we should have a very good plan on how the migration would go, and then the implementation itself. I don't think it will take more than a milestone to just implement the migration code, so to say. But yeah, figuring out all the links and places and how that is mapping, that's where I think the delay is going to be.
Yeah, so I think our confidence level in our confidence level in the accuracy of our confidence level in delivering by April will jump exponentially at the end of this quarter.
Great.
Or whenever
Yeah,
we figure out the migration plan.
Mm-hmm.
So
So it's
to be
like it
determined.
seems achievable, but TBD.
Yeah.
If
Like
team
right
here?
now, I'd
Okay.
say our, I don't know what our confidence level is in our estimate right now, but
Sounds like 50.
yeah, sure, we can go with that. And then it'll be like 90 once we figure out
Less than 50.
the migration. So I'm
Okay.
still pretty
That's
confident
totally
that we can
fair.
get it. I'm pretty confident that we can get it done. I'm not very confident in my in my saying that I'm confident in getting it done. What was it saying? 50% of the time it's we'll be right 100% of the time.
All right, that's fair. I think it's totally fine to say end of the quarter we'll have greater confidence, and that's a good like timeline.
50% is always fair because it's either done or not done, right? So it's always 50%.
Yeah, flip a coin.
Flip a coin.
Like Alexandro, you're mentioning the self-managed case, and that's a fair point. But I think maybe what I get is like with the work harder migration, what we get is velocity back for us as an engineering team and feature parity. So even though it takes me maybe 1 month more for self-managed customers, we gain this way earlier. Like we can ship features easier. So I think this is the main point, right? Once we have the GitLab.com migration done, this is where we want to be, even if it takes 1 month more for self-managed.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. But yeah, once it's on .com, it's obviously it's going to land on self-managed.
All right, I think we can call it an end here. Thanks a lot, everyone, for staying way over. We have, I think, hit a new record of running for 1 hour. So, yeah. Thanks a lot, and see you all next week. Bye.
Everyone.